Welcome everyone to e-commerce trends in 2025. I'm Pamela. I will be your host today as we walk through some of the trends we see for the future in 2025. We'll be joined shortly by our two guests, Ethan and Morgan. But first, I'm going to walk through some of the trends that we've outlined in our report this year. And actually, before we even get to that, we will be doing a few Q&A questions or poll questions, and you're going to be able to find those poll questions when we get to them in the sidebar to your right. You'll see a chat and a Q&A, and when those polls go live, you'll also see the poll tab, and you can answer the questions in there. Now, since we are here looking at the chat, let's get started by getting everyone in the chat and answering a few questions. So, if you signed up as you all signed up for this webinar, you answered a poll question when you signed up for this webinar. We asked you which trend you would like to hear more about in 2025. We asked you whether that was lifestyle and editorial imagery, AI, virtual models, or UGC. Which one do you think was the top response? Which one do you think everyone has some burning questions about? Let us know in the chat which one you think it is. Okay. Gregory is certain that it's AI. Anyone else? Okay, we got AI, we got UGC, we got AI. Okay, hello everyone. We're just popping into the chat. Good to see you. I actually hate to burst everyone's bubble here because I have yet to see the answer up here, but it was actually lifestyle and editorial imagery with 45.61%. That was the most requested trend to hear about. So we will be hearing a little bit about that today. All right. And then, well, I'll bring up the LinkedIn. We also asked the same question on LinkedIn. And over there, we changed up the question a little bit. And the winner was authenticity and trust. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with maybe lifestyle and editorial imagery, though. Yes, Gregory, I think it is pretty encouraging too. I think we might, it turns out AI is not the only trend out there. All right, so let's talk about this year's report that we put out. I was really excited with this year's report. We decided to add in a lot of consumer research and data in there, which was something new that we haven't had before. So this year's report really takes a look at perspectives from our community and from consumers. The first trend we outlined was AI yet again. It keeps coming back because it's not going anywhere. And this time we really focused on letting the voices of the community and the consumers shine in the report. And our community really agrees that we're moving forward to this place where AI is just really this robust tool that we should be using as part of our creative process. And in the report, you can find a couple popular use cases that we run through that we may be seeing more of next year. We also tried to take the pulse of the consumers and how they feel about AI-generated imagery. So we specifically asked about AI-generated imagery. And on a sliding scale, 57% of consumers said that AI imagery would have little to no impact or a positive impact on their shopping decisions. And while this may not be a completely overwhelming positive statement of confidence in AI, it still shows that I think there are a lot of consumers out there that feel okay or comfortable with seeing some AI imagery. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how we might be seeing more generated AI play a role in product images. Our next trend we outlined was virtual models. We included it this year as we've seen a lot of exploration around this. You can take a look at the two campaigns Mango put out. Those were AI campaigns with AI models. But when we talk about virtual models in our report, we're also talking about CGI models in this trend. And actually in a webinar earlier this year, 76% of our webinar attendees said that they've already been researching or experimenting or playing around with virtual models. So I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of the role virtual models can play in our industry. And it's just still really early on. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and what unfolds next year. And then our last trend, we went quite broad and we were calling it finding the balance on the PDP. We are just seeing a lot of, well, as always, we are seeing a lot of demand for more content, especially in this space around authenticity or lifestyle and editorial. And in this report, we focused heavily on UGC and the role it can play in giving consumers an insight into real world engaging content. And it also kind of removes that load on the studio to create more and more images. And currently around 16% of brands have an actual UGC strategy. So in the report, we look into a couple options of how UGC could be incorporated into your PDP. So that is just the start of some of the information we have in the report. We've got more information and data around Pixelz insights into images, more consumer insights. So take a look at that. We'll be sending it out in the email following this webinar. Now, that's enough from me at Pixelz. We're going to invite our guests, Ethan and Morgan, to join us now. Come on stage, you guys. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I just ran through all of our Pixelz and Pixelz trends. And before we get to your guys's, can we start with a little introduction? Ethan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me today. I am the Senior Manager of Photography for Foot Locker North America, and I manage all studios within the United States and Canada.
Thanks, Ethan. Morgan?
Hey, so I am a freelance producer and art director working with brands such as Sainsbury's, Monsoon, and I've previously worked in-house at brands like ASOS and Fennec, most recently building the in-house studio at Fennec.
Awesome, thank you. We didn't talk about this in our webinar prep, but I'm gonna throw you guys a curveball, which is, I think it's also great that we've got someone from the States, obviously, and England to see if there's also some regional and cultural differences in the trends you guys pick out, but we'll get to that in a second.
For sure.
Yeah.
So we are, as I said earlier, going to be setting up some polls now over for all of you in the chat to answer as I quiz Ethan and Morgan on some topics here. I've pulled out some data points from the trend report to see if you guys there is no wrong or right here, right? So, but it'll just be a fun little quiz here. So first question. We asked consumers which kind of imagery they like to see when online shopping. We asked them studio only, lifestyle only, or a combination of both. So right here, we're asking you what % of consumers answered they preferred studio-only photography. And you should see a red dot on your poll where you can hop in there and answer that. So, Morgan, what do you think?
I think it would be a combination. I think
is the highest performing.
Yeah, I think people like to see it in the studio because it's nice and clean, but also kind of out and about and so they can kind of visualize it in their life, you know, but I feel like people like both.
Ethan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say a combination of both. I think there's always going to be, you know, a need for product photography in a studio, but I think that the consumer wants that authenticity of where it's being used or how it's being used, for sure.
So, the answer, so the amount of people that wanted, we're going to close out the poll here in just a second. The amount of people that wanted studio only was 4.5%. the amount of people that wanted a combination of both was 49%. Don't quote me on that. That's from my memory. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah, you guys are correct. The winner was a combination of both, and it's quite interesting that studio only was ranked so low, in my opinion, because we also asked another question where people ranked what was the most important image to see, and they put product only, which has to be shot in the studio. So there's still a little...
Yeah, I think that's what it is, though. People like to see the product by itself so that they know exactly what they're buying, but then they want to visualize it, like how the use of it, how they're going to use it. And so, yeah, more is more kind of in this case.
Yes. They want it all, basically, is what we've learned here.
Yeah.
All right, question number 2. What percent of people say UGC highly impacts their purchasing decisions? Is it 69%, 79%, or 35%? And that poll is live again in the poll tab. All right, Ethan, what do you think?
I would say 69%. I think it depends on like the actual UGC, like if the model is relatable. And it really like fits the consumer. I don't think that it's always make or break, but I think that it definitely has a huge impact for sure.
Morgan, what do you think?
I was actually going to go 79%, but I totally agree with what Ethan was saying, because sometimes, like just thinking about myself, the models used I can't relate to, but I definitely think it's good to see it on a person. So I guess UGC aspect, if you can get multiple customers showing their images on your site, you'll obviously have a wide range of body shapes, ethnicities, like all of those things, which I think is always a good thing.
And the last vote's in. I'm about to tell you the answer. The answer was 79%. I will say this came from another study. I pulled this data point from another study. Our own consumer survey put it at 59 point, basically 60%, a little off from the other data I found online. All that's linked in the report. Surprised? Not surprised? What do you think, guys think? Not surprised.
Not very surprised. Not very surprised at all.
Especially
in this day and age.
Right. That's the main point. Do you it's hard with these surveys to understand if people, especially this one, UGC, are they thinking straight from Instagram or on the PDP? Like, we'll never know, right? Because people come from.
It's more social led. I don't think that UGC. I think that companies would have a more difficult time sourcing the UGC for PDP, et cetera. I think it's bigger for like social campaigns or .com placement as a homepage banner or something like that, where you're really trying to like sell the lifestyle. I think depending on how many products the company has can really dictate like how much UGC they're really able to get, and consistency. I think the more people that you work with, the less consistent your content is going to be. So I think that's another thing to take into consideration for sure. But the numbers don't surprise me.
Yeah, and I think what you said is on track with a lot of brands maybe not having a fully established UGC strategy. It's hard, right, when it's inconsistent. So, but it does lead to my next question, which is, let's get the poll up. What did consumers rank as the top reason for losing trust in a brand? Is it authentic content, strong social media presence, clearly stated use of AI, limited retouching, or overuse of retouching? I feel like maybe this one is easy, but let's see. Morgan, what do you think?
Oh, I'm kind of torn between authentic content and overuse of retouching.
Interesting.
Yeah, if I have to choose one, maybe authentic content, because I guess overuse of retouching isn't authentic then either. But I think people like buy from people, and I think that's really kind of shown with this day and age of like TikTok Shop and all of those types of things. So I think people like to see authentic, uses of whatever they're going to buy. So if that's in like UGC, or some other sort of form, like a lifestyle image or something like that, I think that's what people like to see. So if a brand doesn't have that authentic content, then it'll lose their customers' trust.
Okay, so you think a lack of authentic content would lose trust?
Yeah.
Okay. And Ethan, what do you think?
Yeah, I would totally agree with the lack of authentic content. I think brand identity is super important, staying on brand for your consumer. I think when you start doing things, when you're swaying that pendulum and you're going too far to one side, I think people aren't really understanding what they're looking at. They get confused as to what they're buying. But I think also limited retouching. I think the overusage of retouching now has become like, we want to be more authentic. We want to look the way that we actually look. We don't want to look overly retouched anymore. I think people are more comfortable in their own skin. So I think that's definitely something that I would call out as like the overusage of retouching and inauthentic content to the brand, for sure.
I think that's a great point of so let me give the answer, which is the number one reason to lose trust is overuse of retouching. But I think what you said is really interesting at the end there of inauthentic content to the brand, right? Because I've started to now see the word authentic content everywhere, and maybe it's, we write about it ourselves. So it's one of those things where you start to hear it so much, you're not even sure what it means anymore.
Exactly.
Do either of you have a quick definition of what you think authentic content is, besides leaving out UGC? What would you say authentic?
I'd say it's like whatever the true identity of the brand is. So really knowing your customer and what it is your customers want to see. That's what that brand's authentic content is.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's creating that story and that feeling that resonates with the consumer and the brand that you're speaking to. I think without those, you don't really have anything. It's the most important part of what we do as creators, right?
Yeah, and it's such a easy yet hard question to answer, because I think you both hit the nail on the head, but then it means doing the work in-house to understand what your brand is then, which can be a lot of work. All right, we'll move to our very last question. We asked, how many consumers say that virtual models have little to no impact on their purchasing decision? We have 33%, 72%, 50%. Ethan, want to take a stab at this?
I would say 50%. I think that the consumer these days wants to see what it looks like on model. I'm not too sure. I haven't really dove in pretty deep into AI models and things and data, but I think that people are getting away from just seeing it as a product. They want to see it on a human being, and I think that's super important. But it's also not a lot of brands are doing it. So
yeah,
it really, I would say 50%.
Morgan?
I think this is going to be higher than we expect. Because I think as well, do the customers really realize when it is a virtual model, because I think the technology is actually really good these days. So I don't know though, 72% seems a little high, so maybe I'll go 50% as well.
Yes, and sorry to spoil it for anyone that hasn't answered, 50% is correct. I think it's interesting. I agree wholeheartedly with what you both said. I think there's a very big question of these things are so new that when we ask these questions of consumers, do they know? And that's when we start getting into deeper conversations around do we tell them? Do we not tell them? That's a big conversation for another day, though. I won't make you guys answer that now. So, all right. Thank you for playing my little quiz game here about some of the data we had. So now it's time for you guys to share what you think is coming in 2025. Let's start with you, Ethan. You want to let us know
Sure.
what's happening?
Yes, I actually touched on a lot of the things that we spoke about for 2025. I think it's a blend of high-tech advancements with a renewed emphasis on authenticity and personalization. We all know about AR and using 360. I think the consumer really wants to dive deeper into 360 product views online, not just a PDP image, but I think being able to really like zoom in on the product and seeing the intricate details, highlighting textures. Those are things that are really important, especially for luxury items or handcrafted pieces, things that you really need to be able to see. So I think that's one thing. AR and 3D, it's not going away. If anything, it's just how do we utilize it? So I think with that also comes with personalized AI to give the consumer a better experience. So being able to go on a website and put in your body weight, your shape, your skin tone, all of that, so that you can actually see what the product is going to look like on you. I think a lot of people during COVID and things of that nature, they couldn't shop in stores anymore. People don't want to go into stores all the time. So I think being able to see how it fits you as a person is huge for a personalized experience. And I think that that's going to be a bigger uptick in 2025. And I think the other thing that kind of goes into that is segueing into lifestyle for PDP. I think getting away from shooting things on a cyc wall or a white seamless. I think brands are moving more into using behind the scenes content from campaigns or actual campaign content as PDP. I think it really shows the brand's identity through product storytelling. And I think that that's something that consumer really wants. To be honest, I mean, I've been seeing this a lot in Q3 and Q4 of this year, and I think we're going to see a big swing into 2025. The biggest thing I keep picturing is like selling a couch, right? It's like I would always love to see a couch being promoted or marketed in like a very warm room with a fireplace, a blanket draped over it or a dog sitting on it, and that would make me want to buy it. But I think just having it in a white room on a PDP page or of that nature, it kind of separates you from that experience of like wanting to buy the product. So I think that's like another big thing is like being true to the authenticity of the product that you're selling as well as the brand, right? I think that's like the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now. And then I think the other thing is aesthetic. I think getting away from everything being studio lit and these harsh shadows and knowing that it's in a studio environment. I think taking things outside, but also if it's inside, how do you use more natural light? Is it using film to make it a little more personalized so that it's more authentic to the consumer? I think with that, we go away from the overly polished look. I don't think that product photography as a lay flat, it doesn't have to be a clean folded t-shirt. I think now you can have it kind of thrown on your bed with a nice crease or a fold in it because the consumer wants to feel like they're about to pick that up and put it on, right? It's like they want to feel like it's not just being pushed on them as a product, but something that they can get excited about wearing. So I think like really it's all about authenticity. I think obviously AI is not going away, but I think it's how do we use it in a way that stays true to the consumer, that you're not creating this fake world that we don't really live in. The consumer wants it to be as real as possible. And I think that's like how brands really need to lead into it is like, how can we sell it to the consumer without faking them out and saying like, oh, this isn't real because the product is real. So if you go away from that, you're going to lose, product that isn't true to the brand anymore. So I think those are all like the big things. I'm seeing a lot of these companies start to understand AI in new ways. I think obviously, like I said, it's like a pendulum. It's like you can swing both ways, but there should always be a middle ground and an understanding of just being true. So that's kind of like my pitch. I think I kind of dove into a lot of the things that we spoke about in the questions in the beginning. I'm really excited to see what companies do with some of this information now that it's really out there. The technology is a little more available. I think will be a little easier in the coming year to be able to use AI in different ways, but I'm interested to see like how the authenticity actually picks up and the creative ways that people can use the technology to come up with ways of marketing product.
Thank you, Ethan. I loved everything you shared, and we don't have enough time today in the webinar, but I've got questions for you about the
Sure.
lifestyle. Yeah. All right, Morgan, you ready for your turn?
Yeah, so I guess I agree with a lot of things that Ethan said, and I wanted to kind of delve into lifestyle a little bit more, and I think that's one of the biggest things for brands at the moment, and you can see it with so many brands that have already started doing it, but I think we're going to see it with more. So I've put a couple of images together from a few brands that I think do it really well. If you go to the next slide for me, Pamela. ASOS, they like work in worlds, which I think is an amazing way to do it, and it's like really diving deeply into who that customer is. So like going from left to right, just off the top of my head, I think that one's Topshop on the grey background. And then the middle one is for that kind of Gen Z customer. And then the one on the right is for a very like clean girl aesthetic. So they really understand the nuances of their customer and like who that person is, and creates a set that really appeals to that customer. So I really think we're going to move away from a white world. We might still shoot in a studio, but like Ethan said as well, maybe we're going to use a little bit more natural light, or we're going to use props or flooring or backgrounds or whatever that is to create a bit more of a lifestyle image. And I'm sure everyone knows Zara does this as well. If you skip to the next slide for me, they literally have so many different types of imagery on their website. Like everyone knows the UGC, which I've got as the first image, but they utilize like so many different types of sets, different colors that really complements the clothing, but it kind of creates a scene and kind of makes you want to buy it more. You get excited about the product because it's like, oh, that would be amazing for the party that I'm going to go to, or, this work event or whatever it is, because you can kind of see it in the image. If you skip to the next one as well, you've got Mint Velvet, who I know do really well off their lifestyle imagery, and they like go between kind of like on location and also in kind of like more of a studio setup. I think they shoot a lot on like in location houses, and it looks to me like it's their campaign, like an extension of their campaign imagery that they then use as their e-com imagery. And it feels really authentic for their target market as well. They really understand that customer and who that girl is. And it's not just like the high street brands that do it either. It's your luxury brands. Like on the next slide, I've got Net-a-Porter. They shoot in a lot of different kinds of scenes, and it looks, I don't know the ins and outs of Net-a-Porter personally, but it seems that they do it based on like a customer profile again. So it's kind of that younger, maybe more modern kind of girl is in that concrete sort of studio, but it doesn't feel too much like a studio. Like that could be somewhere that this girl goes to hang out. And then for your kind of more elevated looks or maybe higher price point products, they shoot in this like kind of high-end home sort of scene, which I think looks really great, and it really does complement that product as well. And they do it with the still life, like all their bags and shoes on this plinth, which I just think like adds a little extra edge to the images. So I think we're going to see more of this with more brands, a big spectrum of brands, like from your maybe supermarket fashion brands all the way up to your luxury brands. And it like Ethan said, with your homeware brands as well, we're going to see lots more of that in kind of a lifestyle setting and detach away from that kind of white world, which I feel like we're all very used to, but it feels that everyone's kind of moving away from that now. And even if they shoot in a white studio, there's elements that kind of are moving away from that. So I think that's what we're going to see a lot more of in next year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan. I love the visuals you pulled, and we had a comment in the chat over there, Natalie, saying they've been telling their selling students to stop using product on whites on their PDPs for years.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear the overlap from both of you, that basically, if I were to summarize what I just heard from both of you, is that we're adding life, a little bit of more life into to product images. It's no longer just, here's your product. So I'm going to use this opportunity to see if there's any questions in the chat real quick. We have just a couple minutes. We're a little over time, but I'll wait to see if there's any questions. I think it's interesting because earlier I said something about not knowing if the consumers would know about like retouching, or how do they find UGC. Sometimes I think there's a question in my own brain about how much do the consumers know about product images. But I think they actually know a lot, right? I think sometimes it's more than even just what they want to see, but they know when we're selling them an image that works or doesn't work. And I think your trends kind of reflect that, the personalization, the needing to see life in the images. And before, I'm not seeing any questions come through, which is excellent, fine. I think everyone loved what you guys had to say. Anything else you want to say about 2025? Anything that you're most excited about in your work or to see happen next year?
I think in my work, it would just be like kind of switching it up every day. Like, I think a lot of creatives are somewhat a little bit bored maybe of turning up and you shoot everything on a white set. It all looks the same and it gets really repetitive. But if you're shooting in this kind of more lifestyle feel, it mixes it up and it makes it a little bit more fun.
So true.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would definitely say, keep pushing the limits. I think getting away from white and really like honing in on the creative and the story. I think that is the most important thing for every day, so that it doesn't get stale for the photographer and the consumer. I think you always have to come up with a new idea, or else the consumer's just not going to want it.
Awesome. Let's take one question before we get out of here, because I need to know the answer. Will glossy high production images make a comeback?
I feel like not next year.
Okay, so we'll revisit that next year this time.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's a time and place for everything. I think I don't see it as like a big trend, but I think you look at film grain, it's coming back. People are shooting on film. I think like high gloss, you never know, it could come back in the next year or two as the next big thing that we're reintroducing, like baggy jeans, right? So you just never know.
Yeah, we could loop back around.
Yeah.
Give it time. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I loved hearing what you had to say. Personally, I'm going to have some more questions for you when we get off this webinar. And thank you everyone for joining us. We'll be sending out a follow-up with a link to the full report. And then if you're over on LinkedIn, you may have seen that today we launched our Flow North America. So please go check that out. And thanks once again, guys. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good day.